The Concord of 12 had ruled the galaxy for 30,000 years. 12 ancient species, each one older than most stars, had come together long ago to create peace. They built great stations that floated between worlds. They made laws that every civilization followed. They believed they had solved all problems, answered all questions, and conquered all fears. Fear, to them, was something from the past. Their scientists had studied it. Their philosophers had written about it. They knew exactly what fear was and how it worked in the minds of living creatures. It was simple, they thought. Fear was what prey felt when predators came close. Fear was what made weak creatures run and hide. Advanced species, civilized species, had moved beyond such primitive feelings. The Veilith were the oldest of the 12. They were tall beings made of living crystal, and their minds worked like perfect machines. They felt no emotion at all. They looked at the universe through cold, clear logic. When the Concord needed someone to study a new species or explore a dangerous region, they sent the Veilith. Commander Sylphan had served the Concord for 300 years. She had visited 11 primitive worlds and studied 11 young species. Each time, the work was the same. She would watch them from orbit, record their signals, learn their languages, and write a report. Most young species were simple creatures. They fought small wars over small things. They feared the dark, feared predators, feared each other. Eventually, they would grow up and join galactic civilization, or they would destroy themselves. Either way, it was not very interesting. When Sylphan's ship detected signals from a small yellow star, she expected nothing special. The star sat in a quiet arm of the galaxy, far from anything important. The signals were primitive radio waves, the kind that young species always produced when they first learned to use electricity. She ordered her crew to begin standard observation. The first signals they decoded were music. Sylphan found this curious. The music was complex and emotional, full of sounds that rose and fell like waves. Her crew listened for hours, trying to understand what these creatures were expressing. There was joy in some of the music, but also sadness, anger, and something else they could not name. Then they decoded the language and began to access the species' information networks. They found literature, art, philosophy, and science. They found history. The history made them stop. Sylphan sat in her command chamber and read for 7 cycles without pause. Her crystalline mind, which had remained calm through centuries of service, began to feel something it had never felt before. She read about wars that had killed millions. She read about weapons that could poison entire continents. She read about leaders who had ordered the death of their own people, not for any logical reason, but simply because those people were different. She read about bombs that could split atoms and turn cities into ash in a single heartbeat. These creatures called themselves humans. They lived on a world they called Earth, and they had spent their entire existence trying to destroy each other. But that was not the part that disturbed Sylphan most. The part that disturbed her was that they had not destroyed themselves. They had come close, many times. They had built weapons capable of ending all life on their world. They had pointed those weapons at each other. And yet, somehow, they had survived. They had not just survived. They had grown stronger. Every war, every disaster, every terrible moment in their history had taught them something. They learned to build better weapons, yes, but they also learned to build better medicines, better machines, better ways to grow food and cross oceans and reach for the stars. Sylphan read about a human war that had killed 60 million people in just 6 years. When the war ended, the humans did not collapse into despair. They built new cities on the ashes of the old. They created new technologies. They sent machines to their moon and robots to other planets. The war had broken them, but they had put themselves back together and become something more. She read about disasters that would have ended most species, plagues that killed half their population, ice ages that covered their world in frozen death, asteroids that had wiped out most life on their planet millions of years ago. Each time, something had survived. Something had crawled out of the ruins and started again. Sylphan called her crew together and shared what she had learned. The Maravani empath, a soft-bodied creature named Calith who could feel the emotions of others, asked to experience the human broadcasts directly. She reached out with her mind toward the distant blue world and tried to taste the feelings of its people. She pulled back immediately, her body shaking. "What did you feel?" Sylphan asked. Calith took a long moment to answer. "Fear," she said finally. "They are full of fear, but it is not like any fear I have ever felt. It is not cold. It does not make them weak. It is like fire. It burns inside them, every moment of every day. They are afraid of everything: disease, war, death, each other. But instead of running from their fear, they run toward it. They use it. It makes them strong." Sylphan considered this. In her 300 years, she had never encountered a species that used fear as a source of strength. Fear was supposed to be a weakness, a primitive response that civilized beings overcame. But these humans had not overcome their fear. They had embraced it. "There's something else," Calith continued. Her voice was quiet now, almost a whisper. "They know they are going to die. Every single one of them knows, from the time they are small children, that one day they will stop existing. They carry this knowledge with them always. And instead of being paralyzed by it, they use it as a reason to act. They do things because they know their time is limited. They build, they create, they fight, they love, all because they know the darkness is coming for them." Sylphan stood in silence for a long moment. Then she returned to her command chamber and wrote her report to the Concorde. It was the shortest report she had ever written, just 3 lines. This species should not be contacted. They should be observed only from a great distance. If they ever develop faster than light travel, containment measures should be considered. They are not like us. They are not like anything we have ever encountered. They are afraid of everything, and that fear has made them dangerous beyond measure." She sent the report and waited for the Concorde's response. The Concorde, in its ancient wisdom, chose to disagree. The Concorde did not listen to Sylphan's warning. They had made contact with hundreds of species over 30,000 years. Every time, the pattern was the same. Young species were always afraid at first. They saw the great ships descending from the sky, and they panicked. But then the Concorde would show them wonders. Medicine that could cure any disease. Technology that could end hunger. The promise of joining a galactic family that stretched across 1,000,000 stars. Every species, no matter how primitive, eventually understood that cooperation was better than conflict. The Council of Elders chose to make contact with humanity during a moment of global celebration. The humans were holding something they called the World Cup, a sporting competition watched by billions of people around their planet. The Council believed this would be the perfect moment. The humans would be united, happy, and open to new experiences. They sent their finest diplomatic vessel, a ship called the Herald of Peace. It was beautiful, shaped like a silver leaf, and it moved through space without any visible engines. The ship carried ambassadors from all 12 species of the Concorde. They had prepared gifts and speeches. They had practiced human languages. They were ready to welcome humanity into the galactic family. The Herald of Peace entered Earth's atmosphere slowly and gracefully. It descended over the largest city in the region where the sporting event was being held. Billions of humans looked up and saw the silver ship floating in their sky. The broadcast stopped. The crowds went silent. For one long moment, The entire human species held its breath. Then everything went wrong. Within 6 minutes, the Herald was surrounded by human military aircraft. They were primitive machines, using chemical engines and guided missiles, but there were dozens of them. They circled the Herald like angry insects, their weapons ready to fire. The Concord ambassadors watched through their viewing screens with growing confusion. This was not how first contact was supposed to happen. Within 30 minutes, the confusion turned to horror. Ambassador Velith of the Threnodites was monitoring human communications. He was an ancient being, 6,000 years old, and he had seen many strange things in his long life. But nothing had prepared him for what he was hearing now. Human leaders around the planet were arguing with each other, their voices sharp with tension. They were not discussing whether to welcome the visitors or how to communicate with them. They were discussing whether to attack and who would get to attack first. They are fighting over who will fire the first weapon, Velith reported to the other ambassadors. Several of their nations have armed nuclear devices. They are preparing to use them. Against us, but also against each other if necessary. The Concord ambassadors could not understand this. Nuclear weapons would not hurt the Herald. Its shields could withstand the heart of a star. But the humans did not know that. As far as they knew, they were preparing to attack an unknown alien vessel with weapons that might not work. They were preparing to start a war they could not win. And they were doing it within minutes of first contact. Ambassador Kaleth of the Moravani stepped forward. She was the same empath who had touched human minds from Sylphan's observation ship. She had recovered from that experience, but she still remembered the burning sensation of human emotion. Now she needed to try again. "Let me reach out to them," she said. "Let me show them we mean no harm." The other ambassadors agreed. Kaleth closed her eyes and extended her consciousness toward the planet below. She had done this many times before with many species. She would find the leaders, the decision-makers, and she would send them feelings of peace and goodwill. She would calm their fears and open the door to communication. She found human minds easily. There were so many of them, billions of bright sparks of consciousness burning across the planet. She reached out to touch them, to share her peaceful intentions. What she found nearly killed her. The fear was there, just as she remembered. But it was not the fear of prey animals seeing a predator. It was not the cold, paralyzing terror that she had felt in hundreds of other species during first contact. Human fear was hot. It was a fire that burned in their blood and their bones. It filled them with energy instead of draining it away. It made them faster, stronger, more alert, and mixed with the fear, impossible to separate from it, was something else: aggression, violence, the desire to fight, to hurt, to destroy. Kaleth had never felt anything like it. In every other species, fear and aggression were opposites. Creatures either ran or they fought. But humans felt both at the same time. They were terrified and furious in the same heartbeat. She pushed deeper, trying to understand. She found soldiers in their aircraft, their hands steady on their weapons. They knew they might die. They knew their weapons might not work against the alien ship. And they did not care. They were not hoping to survive. They were hoping to fight. They wanted to prove that humanity would not go quietly, would not surrender without a struggle, would make the invaders pay for every inch of sky. She found leaders in their bunkers, watching screens and giving orders. They were afraid too, afraid for their families, their nations, their species. But beneath the fear was something cold and hard. They were already planning how to continue the war if the first attacks failed. They were thinking about guerrilla tactics, about hidden weapons, about teaching their children to fight. They were preparing to resist for years, for decades, for generations if necessary. She found ordinary people in the streets, looking up at the silver ship. Many of them were praying. Many of them were crying. But she felt their thoughts, and she understood something that shook her to her core. They were not praying for survival. They were praying for courage. They were asking their gods to make them brave enough to face whatever was coming. Keleth pulled back from human consciousness and collapsed on the deck of the Herald. Her body was shaking. Her mind felt burned. The other ambassadors rushed to help her, but she pushed them away. She had to speak. She had to warn them. "They are not afraid of us," she whispered. "They are afraid that they will not get to fight us. They are afraid we will leave, and they will never have the chance to prove themselves. They want this war, not because they think they can win, because they think that dying in battle is better than living in submission." The ambassadors stood in stunned silence. This was not possible. No rational species wanted war. War was destruction, death, the end of everything a civilization built. Why would anyone choose it? Veleth, the ancient Threnodite, was the first to speak. "What do we do?" Keleth looked at him with exhausted eyes. "We show them we are not enemies. We prove to them that we come in peace. And we do it quickly, before they convince themselves that attack is the only option." She paused, gathering her strength. "And we remember, every moment we deal with this species, that they are not like us. When we feel fear, we seek safety. When they feel fear, they seek battle. Their terror and their courage are the same thing. And I do not know if we can ever truly understand beings like that." 50 years passed after first contact. Humanity joined the Concord, but they were kept at a distance. The elder races gave them a seat at the council table, but they did not give them real power. Human ships were allowed to travel between stars, but only on approved routes. Human colonies were permitted on a few distant worlds, but always far from the core systems where the true powers of the galaxy lived. The Concord was afraid of humans, though they would never admit it. They watched humanity carefully, hoping that exposure to galactic civilization would soften these strange creatures. Perhaps, given enough time, humans would become more like the other species. Perhaps they would learn to value peace over conflict, safety over glory. They were still waiting when the Vreth arrived. The Vreth were a nightmare-given form. They came from beyond the edge of the galaxy, from the empty darkness between stars. No one knew where they had originated or how old they were. What everyone knew was that they consumed. They were a swarm species, billions upon billions of creatures that moved from world to world, eating everything in their path. They had destroyed civilizations older than the Concord. They had turned garden worlds into barren rocks. Nothing could stop them. Nothing could slow them down. When the Vreth entered Concord space, the 12 elder races did what they had always done. They calculated. They negotiated. They offered the Vreth the outer systems, the distant colonies, the worlds that were not important. They hoped to buy time. They hoped the swarm would eat its fill and move on. This strategy had worked before, with other threats. The galaxy was vast. There was always more room to retreat. Humanity did not retreat. The first Vreth swarm descended on New Helsinki, a human colony on a cold world at the edge of Concord space. 6 million humans lived there, farming the frozen soil and mining the Rocky Mountains. They were ordinary people, workers, and families, not soldiers. When the sky turned dark with Vreth ships, they should have run. They should have evacuated, fled to safer worlds, saved themselves. Instead, they stayed. The colony governor was a woman named Ingrid Voss. She was 60 years old, with gray hair and hard eyes. She had been a soldier once, long ago, before she came to New Helsinki to build a new life. When her advisors told her the Vreth were coming, she did not panic. She called a meeting of every person in the colony who could hold a weapon. "The Concord has abandoned us," she told them. "They have decided that our world is not worth saving. They expect us to die quickly and quietly, to buy time for the important people on the important worlds." She paused, looking at the faces of farmers and miners and teachers and children. I say we make them regret that decision. I say we show the galaxy what humans do when our backs are against the wall. The colony transformed. Factories that had built farming equipment began building weapons. People who had never held a gun learned to shoot. Children too young to fight carried ammunition and medicine to the front lines. Old people who could barely walk manned gun positions in radio stations. Every person on New Helsinki had a job, and every job was about one thing: killing Vreth. The swarm expected an easy victory. They had consumed hundreds of worlds. They knew how primitive species behaved when faced with overwhelming force. The creatures would panic, scatter, try to flee. The Vreth would hunt them down and feed. It would take a few days at most. The first wave of Vreth soldiers landed near the capital city. They charged forward in their millions, a tide of claws and teeth and hunger. And they ran directly into a wall of fire. The humans had prepared killing fields. They had dug trenches and built bunkers. They had placed mines and traps and automated weapons. The Vreth died by the thousands, then by the hundreds of thousands. Their bodies piled up so high that the soldiers behind them had to climb over mountains of their own dead. The Vreth commanders were confused. This was not how prey behaved. They sent more soldiers, then more, then more. The humans kept killing them. When the automated weapons ran out of ammunition, humans fired the guns themselves. When the guns broke, they used knives and clubs in their bare hands. A single human, wounded and dying, was seen strangling a Vreth soldier with her own intestines before she finally stopped moving. The siege lasted 11 months. The Concorde watched from a safe distance, recording everything. They could not believe what they were seeing. The Vreth lost 400 million soldiers on New Helsinki. 400 million. More casualties than they had suffered in the previous 10,000 years combined. And still the humans fought. The orbital defenses fell after 3 months. The humans retreated underground and kept fighting. The main cities were destroyed after 6 months. The humans fell back to bunkers and tunnels and kept fighting. The bunkers were breached after 9 months. The humans collapsed the tunnels on top of Vreth soldiers, buried themselves alive, and kept fighting from the rubble dot. By the end, only a few thousand humans remained. They were starving, wounded, running out of everything. They knew they could not win. They had known from the beginning that they could not win. But they had made the Vreth pay for every meter of ground. They had made the swarm bleed. When the last bunker finally fell, the Vreth found only one thing inside: a recording device. It had been left by Ingrid Voss, who had died 3 weeks earlier holding a defensive position. Her message played automatically when the Vreth entered. Her face appeared on the screen, tired and bloody but calm. She spoke directly to the camera, as if she knew exactly who would be watching. "You have taken our world," she said. "You have killed our families. You have won, but you have not defeated us. We are humans. We do not know how to be defeated. Even when we lose, we do not lose. We simply wait for another chance." She smiled, a thin and terrible smile. "One day, my species will find you. It might take 100 years. It might take 1,000. But we will find you wherever you run, wherever you hide. And we will teach you what we learned on Earth in our long and bloody history. The universe is cold and cruel and does not care if you live or die. Neither do we." The recording ended. The Vreth commanders stood in the ruins of the bunker, surrounded by the bodies of their soldiers. And they made a decision that their species had never made before. They retreated. The swarm pulled back from Concorde space. They did not negotiate, did not demand tribute, did not try to claim other worlds. They simply left, disappearing back into the darkness between stars. And across the galaxy, Every species watched and wondered what kind of creatures could make the Wrath afraid. The Concord called an emergency council meeting, the first in 8,000 years. Representatives from all 12 elder races gathered in the great chamber at the heart of the galaxy, a room that had seen treaties signed and wars ended and civilizations born. Now it would see something else, a debate about the nature of humanity. The question before them was simple. What were humans? How had a species so young, so primitive, so new to the stars managed to do what no one else could? How had they made the Wrath retreat? Commander Silthan of the Velis spoke first. She had been the one to discover humanity 50 years ago. She had warned the Concord not to make contact. Now she stood before them and explained what her people had learned through decades of careful study. Humans evolved on a death world, she said. Their planet, Earth, is one of the most dangerous environments we have ever recorded. The climate shifts between deadly extremes. The ground itself shakes and breaks apart. Massive storms sweep across the surface. Diseases spread through the population constantly. And the other life forms on the planet are just as dangerous. Predators, parasites, poisonous plants. Everything on Earth is trying to kill everything else. She paused to let this sink in. But the most dangerous thing on Earth was always other humans. They evolved as social predators. They formed groups, and those groups competed with each other for resources. For 100,000 years, the greatest threat to any human was another human. They did not learn to fear predators hiding in the shadows. They learned to fear the stranger from the next valley, the rival tribe, the enemy nation. The council listened in silence. This was not entirely new information, but Silthan was building toward something. Other species, she continued, developed fear as a survival mechanism. When they sensed danger, their bodies would freeze or flee. This is efficient. It keeps creatures alive long enough to reproduce. But humans developed something different. When they sense danger, their bodies prepare for combat. Their hearts beat faster. Their muscles fill with blood. Their minds become sharper and more focused. Fear, for humans, is not a signal to run. It is a signal to fight. Elder Morath of the Silthine raised a tentacle. Many species have fight responses, he said. We have seen this before. It is not unique. No, Silthan agreed. What is unique is the combination. Humans can feel extreme fear and extreme aggression at the same time. In most species, these are opposite responses. You either run or you fight. Humans do both. They attack while terrified. They charge toward the thing they fear most. This is why they were able to face the Wrath. They were afraid, deeply afraid, but their fear made them more dangerous, not less. Ambassador Kelleth stepped forward. She had recovered from her experience during first contact, but the memory still haunted her. Now she shared something she had not revealed before. When I touched human minds during first contact, she said, I felt something that I still do not fully understand. Humans are aware of their own death. They know from the time they are small children that they will die. This knowledge lives in them always, like a shadow following them through their lives. She shook her head slowly. For most species, such awareness would be paralyzing. We would be unable to function, unable to think of anything else. But humans have turned this awareness into a weapon. They know they will die, and so they ask themselves, how do I want to die? They would rather die fighting than die running. They would rather die standing than die on their knees. The certainty of death has not made them weak. It has made them desperate in a way that gives them strength. The council chamber was very quiet. These ancient beings, who had lived for thousands of years, who had built civilizations that spanned the stars, were beginning to understand something that frightened them. Elder Veleth, the oldest member of the council, rose to speak. He moved slowly, his ancient body frail, but his voice was clear. "I have lived for 6,000 years," he said. "I have seen empires rise and fall. I have witnessed wars that burned entire star systems. I thought I understood fear. I thought it was something that civilized beings overcame, something we left behind as we evolved toward rationality and peace." He turned to look at the images of New Helsinki that still displayed on the chamber walls. The ruined cities, the mountains of Wrath dead, the final message from Ingrid Voss. "I was wrong," he said. "We did not overcome fear. We avoided it. We built our civilization on the principle that if we were strong enough, advanced enough, careful enough, we would never have to feel afraid again. We created safety and called it wisdom." He pointed at the images. Humans did not do this. They could not do this. Their world would not allow it. So instead of trying to eliminate fear, they learned to live with it. They learned to use it. They turned their greatest weakness into their greatest strength. The council sat in heavy silence. "The Vreth retreated," Veleth continued, "not because humans defeated them militarily. The Vreth could have won. They could have sent more soldiers, more ships, more resources. They could have destroyed New Helsinki completely and moved on to other worlds. But they did not. They retreated because, for the first time in their existence, they felt something they had never felt before." He looked around the chamber at the representatives of the 12 most powerful species in the galaxy. They felt fear. The Vreth consume worlds. They are the thing that other species have nightmares about. And on New Helsinki, they found a species that gave them nightmares in return. Humans showed them that no matter how many soldiers they sent, no matter how long the fight lasted, the cost would always be too high. Humans showed them that some prey bites back so hard that it is not worth hunting. Elder Morath shifted uncomfortably. "What are you suggesting? That we should be afraid of humans too?" Veleth smiled, a thin and humorless expression. "I am suggesting that we already are. We have been afraid of them since first contact. We kept them at a distance, gave them only the crumbs of our technology, limited where they could travel and what they could do. We told ourselves we were being wise, being careful, protecting galactic civilization. But we were lying to ourselves. We were afraid of what they might become if we gave them real power." He sat down slowly, his ancient bones creaking. "And now we must decide what to do with that fear. We can try to contain humanity, to limit them, to keep them small and weak. But the Vreth tried that, and you have seen what happened. Or we can accept what they are, work with them, and hope that their terrible strength can be directed toward protecting the galaxy rather than destroying it." He closed his eyes. "Either way, the universe has changed. The Concord has ruled through wisdom and patience for 30,000 years. But wisdom and patience could not stop the Vreth. Only human fear could do that. Only human fury. We must decide whether that makes them our greatest ally or our greatest threat." 100 years passed, and the galaxy transformed. The Vreth swarm was broken. Human warships hunted them across the stars, tracking them to their hiding places in the dark spaces between galaxies. The crews of those ships sang old songs as they closed in for battle, hymns from Earth's long and bloody history. Some of the songs were about death. Some were about glory. Most were about both. The Vreth, who had consumed 1,000 civilizations, learned what it felt like to be prey. The Concord still existed, at least in name. The 12 elder races still held their seats on the council. Their flags still flew above the great stations. But everyone understood the truth now. When humanity spoke, the galaxy listened. Human ships patrolled the trade routes. Human soldiers trained the armies of younger species. Human engineers built the weapons that kept the peace. The elder races had not been conquered. Humanity had never raised a weapon against them, never threatened them, never demanded anything at all. They had simply existed with all their terrible potential, and the elder races had stepped aside. It was easier that way, safer. The Concord had spent 30,000 years avoiding conflict through wisdom and diplomacy. Now they avoided conflict by staying out of humanity's way. On the 100th anniversary of New Helsinki's fall, a memorial service was broadcast across every world in the galaxy. Trillions of beings watched as the human president stood before a monument built on the ruins of Ingrid Voss's last bunker. The president was a woman named Elena Voss, a direct descendant of the hero who had died there. She had her ancestors' gray eyes and steady voice. She looked into the camera and spoke to every living creature in known space. 100 years ago, she said, 6 million humans stood on this world and faced a swarm of billions. They knew they could not win. They knew they would die. And they fought anyway. Not because they were brave. Not because they were foolish. Because they were human, and this is what humans do. She paused, letting the silence stretch. Our friends in the Concord once believed they understood fear. They thought fear was weakness, a primitive response that civilized beings evolved beyond. They built a great and peaceful society based on the principle that rational creatures, when faced with sufficient threat, will always choose survival over conflict. She smiled, and across the galaxy, beings of 100 species felt something ancient stir in the depths of their minds. They were wrong. Fear is not weakness. Fear is memory. It is the voice of every ancestor who survived, whispering in your blood. Be careful. Be ready. Be strong. It is the knowledge that the universe is vast and dark and full of things that want to destroy you. And it is the choice, in the face of that knowledge, to stand and fight rather than run and hide. She gestured at the monument behind her. A simple pillar of black stone with 6 million names carved into its surface. We are not monsters. We did not ask for this role. We did not seek to become the guardians of the galaxy. But we are what our world made us. A species that learned in a cruel and beautiful cradle that nothing is given freely. That survival must be earned every day with sweat and blood and will. That the universe does not care whether you live or die, and neither do the things that live in it. Her voice grew stronger. The Concord preserved peace through wisdom and patience for 30,000 years. This was a great achievement. But wisdom and patience have limits. There are things in the darkness that do not respond to reason, that cannot be negotiated with, that will only stop when they are broken. For those threats, the galaxy needs something else. It needs us. She stepped forward, closer to the camera. We will preserve peace differently. We will preserve it through fear. Not the fear of what we might do to our enemies, though our enemies should be very afraid. The fear of what we are willing to do to ourselves to ensure that our children inherit the stars. She pointed at the names on the monument. Look at these names. Remember what they did. They were farmers and miners and teachers. They were parents and children. They were ordinary people who had never held a weapon before the wrath came. And when the darkness arrived, they did not run. They did not beg. They stood in front of it with whatever they could find, and they said, "You will not pass. You will not take what is ours. You will pay for every step forward with a river of your own blood." Her voice dropped, became almost soft. This is the lesson Earth taught us. There is nothing more terrifying than a creature with nothing left to lose. Except for one thing, a creature that has learned to fight as if everything could be lost at any moment. We live with the knowledge of our own death. We carry it with us always, a shadow at our shoulder, a whisper in our ear. And instead of paralyzing us, it drives us forward. It makes us cherish what we have. It makes us fight for what we love. She turned to look out at the horizon, where the sun was setting over the rebuilt cities of New Helsinki. The Vreth are broken. The galaxy is at peace. But we will not grow soft. We will not forget what we are. We will teach our children the old songs and the old stories. We will train them to fight and to survive. Because the darkness is still out there. And someday, something else will come. Something new, something terrible. Something that thinks it can take what we have built. She turned back to the camera one final time. When that day comes, we will be ready. We will stand in front of the darkness, just as our ancestors did, and we will not move. We will show the universe what it means to be human. We will show them that fear is not weakness. Fear is the fire that forges us. Fear is the blade we hold in our hands. The broadcast ended. In council chambers and throne rooms and hive minds across known space, the powers of the galaxy sat in silence. The humans had not threatened them. The humans had not demanded anything. The humans had simply reminded them of what they already knew. On 1,000 worlds, children of 100 species asked their parents about the creatures called humans. The parents did not know what to say. How could they explain beings who found strength in the very thing that made other species weak? How could they describe creatures who embraced their own mortality and turned it into a weapon? On Earth itself, life continued as it always had. People worked and laughed and loved and fought. They built things and broke things and built them again. They looked up at the stars and wondered what was out there, and they were afraid. And their fear made them dream of ways to reach further, push harder, become more. They did not know they were the most terrifying species in the galaxy. They did not know that ancient civilizations whispered about them in fear. To them, they were just humans, doing what humans had always done, surviving, fighting, refusing to surrender no matter how dark the night became. And far away, in the spaces between galaxies, the scattered remnants of the Vreth swarm drifted through the void. They had consumed 1,000 worlds. They had destroyed civilizations older than the stars. But now they fled from a single species, a small and fragile species from a small and fragile world, because that species had taught them something they had never known before. They had taught them what it felt like to be afraid.